Well, good morning. It is Saturday, October 17th, 2020. You can now relax and be informed. Here is your daily bite of news. California secured a major disaster declaration and disaster relief from the White House on Friday after the Trump administration previously turned down its request. Earlier, FEMA Administrator Pete Gaynor sent Newsom a letter on October 14th that said it determined that the federal government's assistance wasn't necessary. That assessment changed at some point on Friday. "Just got off the phone with President Trump, who has approved our request," Newsom said Friday afternoon in a statement. "We're grateful for his quick response." A declaration by the president makes people in impacted counties eligible for support, such as crisis counseling, housing, unemployment assistance, and legal services. It also allows the federal government to give assistance to state, local, and tribal governments to fund the emergency response. California had previously secured a disaster declaration from the White House in August to support relief efforts for wildfires in the northern part of the state. Denver, Colorado Mayor Michael Hancock said Friday that cases of coronavirus were higher than ever in the Centennial State's capital and surrounding county, prompting health officials to take action and enact additional measures to combat the spread. Increased face mask mandates requiring people to wear masks even when outside have been enforced in Denver and Denver County, and gathering sizes have been reduced from 10 to 5 people until November 16th. The new mask orders only apply when people are not with members of their own household and when social distancing cannot be achieved. Organized sports groups are not required to follow the new rules because they have their own strict regulations, and this rule also does not apply to restaurants, which are regulated through the state and have previously established protective measures. Hancock told Denver citizens that if they do not take increased precautions, we will likely have to fall back on the state's safer at home dial to level 3, and that would be devastating to our economy. Colorado has confirmed nearly 82,000 cases of the virus since the beginning of the pandemic, according to its Department of Public Health and Environment. Nearly 20% of the state's cases have come from the city of Denver. The Supreme Court announced on Friday that it would hear a case on whether the Trump administration can exclude undocumented immigrants from the calculations it will use in apportioning congressional seats. The court put the case on a fast track, saying it will hear arguments on November 30th. Judge Amy Coney Barrett will most likely be on the court by then. The announcement followed an order by the court on Tuesday allowing the administration to cut short the 2020 census count. The administration had said it needed to do so to meet a deadline for submitting its tabulations by the end of the year, allowing President Trump to control the process even if he loses the November election. If the court rules for the administration, it would upend a held consensus that the census must count all residents, whatever their immigration status, and would generally shift both political power and federal money from Democratic states to Republican ones. The Constitution requires congressional districts to be apportioned counting the whole number of persons in each state, using information from the census. In July, President Trump issued a memorandum taking a new approach. For the purpose of the reapportionment of representatives following the 2020 census, it is the policy of the United States to exclude the base aliens who are not in lawful immigration status. Current estimates suggest that one state is home to more than 2.2 million illegal aliens, constituting more than 6% of the state's entire population, the memorandum said, apparently referring to the state of California. Including these illegal aliens in the population of the state for the purpose of apportionment could result in the allocation of 2 or 3 more congressional seats than would otherwise be allocated. Groups represented by the American Civil Liberties Union said the administration's new policy violated the federal statute and the Constitution. The president does not have discretion to pencil out persons included in the actual enumeration to create a separate apportionment based on his own liking, their brief said. Russia on Friday proposed extending a soon-to-expire nuclear arms treaty for 1 year without any changes, a move seen in Washington as a tactic to delay action on the treaty until after the American presidential election. The Russian offer drew a cool reception in Washington, with Within hours, the Trump administration issued a statement from Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor, rejecting the offer from the Russian president. President Putin's response today to extend a New START without freezing nuclear warheads is a non-starter, Mr. O'Brien said. The United States is serious about arms control that will keep the entire world safe. We hope that Russia will reevaluate its position before a costly arms race ensues. Mr. O'Brien repeated the administration's proposal to extend New START for 1 year in exchange for Russia and the United States capping all nuclear warheads during that period. The proposal to cap the warheads would expand New START beyond strategic weapons, its current focus, to also cover tactical nuclear warheads. The Trump administration has balked at agreeing to a 5-year extension without revisions because the treaty signed by President Obama did not cover all of Russia's nuclear arms or any of China's. China, however, has refused to join any revised version of New START, arguing that its nuclear arsenal is tiny compared with those of the United States or Russia. The Russian Kremlin rejected the New START treaty as nonsense. On Thursday night, General Cienfuegos of Mexico was taken into custody by the American authorities at the Los Angeles airport while traveling with his family. He had been Mexico's defense minister from 2012 to 2018 and is being charged with laundering money and trafficking heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines, and marijuana from late 2015 through 2017, according to an indictment unsealed in the Eastern District of New York on Friday. The charges are the result of a multi-year sting that investigators called Operation Padrino. Officials say that General Cienfuegos helped the H2 cartel, a criminal group that committed horrific acts of violence as part of its drug smuggling business with its maritime shipments. In exchange for lucrative payouts, officials say General Cienfuegos also directed military operations away from the cartel and towards its rivals. The U.S. budget deficit more than tripled to a record $3.1 trillion in the latest fiscal year on the government's massive spending aimed at softening the blow of the coronavirus pandemic. Investors have handed the government ultra-low borrowing costs to finance the spending, resulting in a 9% drop in federal interest payments during the year. But the national debt is now bigger than the size of the economy, and it could be almost double GDP by 2050 as an aging population places more demands on Social Security and Medicare, according to the Congressional Budget Office. The risk is that in the long term, rising debt could end up sparking inflation and repelling investors if the market becomes too saturated. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and other officials say eventually the debt trajectory will need to be addressed, but now is not the time to worry because unemployment remains high and the pandemic has crushed many businesses, warranting further support for the economy. Lawmakers remain deadlocked over additional fiscal aid ahead of the November 3rd election. Federal authorities in Utah have charged 21 white supremacist gang members and associates with distributing drugs and firearms across the state, according to a series of indictments unsealed Friday. The charges follow a 16-month investigation into 3 homegrown hate groups: Soldiers of Aryan Culture, Silent Aryan Warriors, and Noble Elect Thugs. The suspects are accused of selling methamphetamine, heroin, painkillers, marijuana, and other drugs in the Salt Lake City and Ogden areas. 9 of the suspects could face up to a life in prison if convicted. Investigators also recovered 15 firearms and pounds of meth during the probe. The New York Post story, which alleged that Biden had improper connections to an executive at a Ukrainian energy firm and has not been independently confirmed, is now shareable on Twitter. Twitter on Wednesday had started blocking the link, citing a policy forbidding users from sharing another person's personal information without their consent. On Thursday night, Twitter changed its hacked materials policy, saying it would no longer block the distribution of hacked materials unless the hacker was circulating it. The company also decided that the personal information contained in emails that were part of the report are now so widely distributed that it's no longer a violation of its private information rule. The process over the controversial story offered a reminder that companies like Twitter and Facebook are still evolving important information policing policies just a week before the U.S. election. That policing has prompted calls of bias and censorship from Republican politicians. Senate Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham and GOP Senator Ted Cruz told reporters Thursday morning that they will vote next week to subpoena Twitter Chief Executive Officer Jack Dorsey to appear before the committee to answer questions about its policies. SpaceX founder Elon Musk is 80 to 90% confident that the company's massive new Starship rocket will reach orbit next year and said there's a chance it will be ready for an uncrewed cargo mission to Mars in 2024. That is also the year NASA wants to return astronauts to the moon. The initial test flights will be difficult. Musk said Friday at a virtual session of the Mars Society conference, "We'll probably lose a few ships before we get to the atmospheric return and landing right." To date, the new rocket has completed at least 2 successful 150-meter test hops. Starship is designed to carry heavy payloads around the solar system and to hold as many as 100 people. Meanwhile, in current space, the oxygen supply system on the International Space Station's Russian segment failed this week. Crew members aren't in danger since the station has another oxygen system on its U.S. segment. But the issue is the latest in a string of problems on the station's Russian side. There have been a broken toilet and an air leak just recently. The Zvezda service module, where the system is located, has been in orbit for 20 years. Turkey and Ukraine signed military cooperation agreements in Istanbul on Friday, deepening a defense partnership seen as an effort to counterbalance Russia's dominance in the Black Sea region. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdogan oversaw the signing of a goodwill agreement concerning the defense industry and a military framework agreement, officials said, although details of the agreements were not immediately known. Last year, Ukraine reached an agreement on the purchase of Turkish-made drones. The two countries are also reportedly engaged in discussions to develop an aircraft engine. The signing of the agreements come as the conflict in the Caucasus over Nagorno-Karabakh is putting a strain on Turkey's relations with Russia. Like many countries, Thailand is giving 14 million citizens cash transfers to help them ride out the pandemic. Since 2017, Thailand has funneled assistance to its poorest citizens via so-called cash cards that are automatically loaded with a small amount of money each month. But the military-backed government that rules the country is getting something potentially valuable in return, a huge volume of data on how millions of Thai citizens spend their money. At any time you're talking about the government's collection and use of personal data, particularly a large volume of it, the risks are always higher, says David Hoffman, a cybersecurity expert at Duke University, who also chairs the National Security Agency's advisory panel on privacy. The dystopian possibility, he says, is that you get a tremendous view into individual citizens that then could be used for a variety of government law enforcement purposes, particularly around the area of silencing social dissent. The card system could become a powerful tool for the government to build loyalty and curb dissent. More than $5.6 billion has been spent through the program, which links transaction data to information about personal finances, education, and biometrics using an open-source analytic software called KIME. Officials say that strict privacy measures are in place, and that data from cards is being used only to serve their stated purpose, helping the millions who are poor enough to qualify for one. No strings-attached cash transfers have become more popular among development economics in recent years, guided by the principle that recipients are better able to decide what they need than bureaucrats. One of the best known is Brazil's Bolsa Familia, which provides money to families who ensure their children attend school and get necessary vaccinations. In India, a biometric identification platform called Aadhaar has enrolled more than 1 billion people. Winston-Salem Police Chief Katrina Thompson is being applauded for her leadership of the police force and her approach to handling the summer of intense protests in her community. As described by journalistic sources, Thompson didn't try to dominate the streets with pepper spray or flashbang grenades, as Attorney General William Barr suggested in a call with governors. There were no platoons or geared-up riot police, no rubber bullets, or swinging batons. Instead, the chief instructed her officers to close the roads and accompany the marchers on bicycles, even if that meant inconveniencing motorists. Drivers can wait 40 minutes, she publicly reasoned. These injustices have been going on for 400 years. Because of that approach, there were no injuries and no arrests. Unlike many of its neighbors, Winston-Salem, population 250,000, did not suffer so much as a broken window. Praising both the protesters and Thompson's leadership, the editorial board of the local newspaper wrote, "Whatever it is we have, we wish we could bottle it and export it." She says, "I was energized by the protesters' determination to be heard, and by them standing up for what they believe is right, which is also what I believe to be right." More important, she felt, were the changes made in her department, which had been heavily criticized in the past. Long before the protest, the Winston-Salem police had adopted all 8 reforms outlined in Campaign Zero's #8Can'tWait initiative, including a ban on chokeholds and requiring de-escalation training for officers. Whenever possible, officers worked with trained mobile crisis management teams to reduce the risk to citizens experiencing a mental health emergency. From 2014 to 2018, arrests for traffic violations, often a hallmark of overzealous policing, dropped by almost half. Another key marker, arrests for nonviolent drug offenses, dropped from 6,500 in 2014 to roughly 5,000 in 2018, all while the clearance rates for violent crimes stayed at or above the national average. Things are moving in the right direction, she says. We are not perfect, and we will never be perfect because we're human, but we're always striving to be better, and we're a whole lot better than many other agencies across the state and across the country. Thompson was the only woman in her rookie class, but she graduated as its president. She rose through the ranks, first in patrol, then in recruiting, training, and criminal investigation divisions. In 2016, she was promoted to assistant chief in charge of the Investigative Services Bureau. Thompson was said to have a defining characteristic by those around her was her openness to feedback. Also, she was described as diplomatic, had a listening ear to the African American community, the Latino community, and the LGBTQ community. Thompson took over as Winston-Salem's police chief in November 2017. She was chosen to lead a department of 570 officers and 173 civilian personnel, working with a budget of $75 million. Thompson stressed her deep love for her community and the need for a zero-tolerance policy in cases of police misconduct. I think that city managers are starting to pick up on the fact that women in this field provide expertise and balance, and that our approaches aren't always about the ego or the brawn, she said. A 2017 survey conducted by the Pew Research Center found that only 11% of female officers had ever fired their weapon on duty, compared with 30% of men, and less than a quarter reported having physically struggled with a suspect in the previous month, compared with 35% of male officers. According to the most recent data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, less than 13% of law enforcement officers are women, and only 3% are African American women. That percentage shrinks the higher you go in the ranks. Less than 3% of all police chiefs are female. This summer, Winston-Salem became the first city in North Carolina whose police department was awarded Tri-Arc status from the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, meaning that it met or exceeded the best practice standards in all 3 of its law enforcement, communications, and training academy divisions. Well, that will be all for our news today. If you'd like to read up on any of these topics, please see our description below for our sources. Subscribe if you'd like to receive a daily news update. Thank you for listening. Be relaxed, be informed, be connected.